Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, and others. I am Abhijit Iyer-Mitra, and I am your host today for PGurus. So welcome to PGurus. Please click like, share, subscribe. So today we're here discussing, my guest today on the program is Mr. Suhel Seth, the world famous marketing guru. And our victim today is a gentleman called Sree Iyer, who normally takes great pleasure in making victims out of other people. But unfortunately, today he's going to be the victim of our roasting. Specifically, we're going to roast him about his two parts of a three-part series of books. Who Painted My Money Red? Who Painted My Lust White? Or did I get that wrong? I think I got the sequence
but that's
wrong.
all right. Just call
Which
it
is
the white
fine.
book and the red book.
The white book and the red book, that's it. Because we don't believe in black and white, we only believe in red and white. So that's where it is.
Ready to fight.
So Sree, for those of us who have not read the book, why don't you just summarize, without giving us any details, what the red and the white book are about?
Yes. So the white book is about the real reason the demonetization was done, and also the ill effects of having a lot of fake currency floating around in the system, what kind of side effects it leads to. And there is a plot there to assassinate the political leader, the prime minister of the country, and how the intelligence bureau thwarts it. And whether they thwart it or not, we have to read the book to find out. And the other book, the red book, is essentially a fictional story about how, politicians came into cricket first, and then how Bollywood was roped in, and this whole saga of IPL, and why the heck does IPL always have to be played in Dubai? What is the reason behind it? I was trying to get into the heads of some of these people to try and say, okay, maybe this is what it is. It has a very strong message, though, for people, especially for Sri Shakti, and I'm hoping that this message gets carried through when people read the book. I hope that answers your two questions.
Yes. Now, Suhel, I am a complete financial ignoramus, unlike you. So since these are essentially a kind of a new genre of financial thrillers in that sense, why don't you tell me, because you know this place so much better, how much of it did you find was realistic in terms of the financial aspects and things like that?
So I think, as you rightly said, there's been a huge, in Sree's books, an intertwining of reality and fiction. And if I may use the phrase, these are two books where the fiction is real, or reality is no longer fictional. And let me explain why. Let's go step by step. Demonetization happened not because we wanted black money to be out. We also wanted the cleansing of our currency mechanism, which was being polluted by powers that were using that currency to foment and to fund terror, to foment and fund drugs, and basically create mayhem in our country. A lot of people, when demonetization happened on that November day, I think it was the 8th
November
of November.
8th, 2016. Yes.
There you are. So I remember the date, November the 8th, when it happened. A lot of people said that, oh my God, this is being done to curb black money. Black money was used as a moniker by the prime minister, and rightly so, because he didn't want to create a panic situation. So when Narendra Modi addressed the nation at 8 p.m. on November the 8th in 2016, his opening remarks were that it is time for India to own its currency. Our currency was being owned in part because it was faked by powers that did not belong to the sovereign realm of India, and it had moved beyond the borders of India. Did it achieve its objectives? I think it did, because for a large part of time post that, we did not see that level of funding. It was also meant to be a political cleanser. The cynics said that it happened just before the UP election, that it was meant to starve the oxygen out of the funds of political parties, and that the BJP had told its own cadres and people that, look, we're going to do this. So if you have any of the old currency, make the change. But obviously that wasn't the case, because it's not easy, because what Modi wisely did was he linked it back to your bank. So you had to go to a bank or a post office or a savings account in order to replace the old with the new. If I recall right, and I was having lunch with Aditya Puri, who was then the CEO of HDFC Bank, and he says the suddenness is both alarming and pleasing. So I said, alarming, I understand. Why pleasing? He says, pleasing because we now have enough time to actually isolate accounts which are dodgy. Because what had happened was when they printed the new currency, all the ATMs had to be recalibrated in order to fit the sizing of the new currency.
Right.
So, to my mind, Sree's book, where it concerns demonetization and where it, the white book, as it were, to my mind, is not only about India's very precarious position qua its currency at that time, but it was also one of the most decisive steps that India took in its independent history. A lot of people compared Modi to the Mughal emperors who changed the coinage and the currency, but those were stupid arguments. The argument was economic and political, and that's where Sree underscores it brilliantly. Because, as you said, you said financial, but I see it through the prism of both the economic and the political. The economic had a terrible effect on the political and vice versa. And it took courage for the political then to cleanse the economic. So it was a political decision to introduce demonetization, and demonetization thereby helped both cleanse India's political environment, but more importantly, India's dangerous zone of where this money was being used to fund terror and drugs.
Right. Now, in terms of stock markets, there are specific stockbrokers who make money even when the market crashes. And I think a lot of what Sree deals with is a lot to do with the loopholes, the cracks, and how criminals tend to sort of recalibrate themselves to make a profit even when things crash. So what happens in this case, Sree? Why don't you kind of explain it without giving too much of the plot away?
Absolutely. See, the core basis for a functioning economy is trust in its currency. And that trust is implicit. Nobody thinks that every time they take out a rupee note, they start looking at it in light and to see if this is the real thing or if this is a fake currency. In fact, the fake currency that was being put out by our hostile neighbors, I'm saying neighbors, okay, so you can get the hint of the other one, which is also doing this, is that the fake currency was so good that even banks were unable to detect the fake from the real, which is why not only did they have to change the denomination, but they also had to change the size, because that made it impossible for the existing horde of currency that was about to enter India. This was the payback or the retribution, if you will, of one of the neighbors for the Uri surgical strike. You see, I don't have proof. I was not a fly on the wall in the Inter-Services Intelligence or in the GHQ Rawalpindi to listen to all these guys do whatever they want to do to hit back. But I can put 1 + 1 together, and I'm coming up maybe with 3, but that's okay. This is only a book of fiction. This is what I'm thinking. I'm connecting some dots, and in that is a story. That's how this happened. So when currency, the confidence in currency returned, the confidence in the country returned. Because remember, every Western country lauded India for doing this. How many times have you seen that happen?
Yeah. Except everybody in Delhi who called it a Tughlakian move.
Look, these guys
which is
they don't even know. Anyway, these are all the ignoramuses. Yeah, go ahead, please.
But Abhijit, you know this landscape the best. Let me give you an example of what happens with the US currency. A lot of people said, almost 2.5 billion was left behind in Afghanistan and the total spend was 2 trillion, blah, blah, blah. If you look at an average household in India, which is above the upper middle class and above, whenever people come back from overseas, they always have some savings in dollar form, $100, $200, $150. Let's take the average of it being $100. And let me say $100 is lying with 1 million people. and obviously with some people it's $500. If you do the math, you're talking about India having non-circulated currency of 1 billion US dollars. This is not the one that's in the Reserve Bank. This is not by way of foreign. Now look at what I'm about to say. The US is impervious, and none of this currency affects either inflationary patterns or their economic activity because it never finds its way back. It is what I call an emotional bulwark, an emotional anchor of a sovereign kind through currency. Now imagine how many US dollars rest in wallets across the world which are not in circulation in the home country, which is known as the United States of America. So the US doesn't even factor. It looks at that as printed currency, which will not come back to impact inflationary trends or any kind of economic activity in the US. But the US does it because its currency is what we call the indexed currency of the world. In India, we did not have and we will never have that level of stature. So it is even more imperative for us to guard sovereign wealth in an important aspect through acquire currency. And that's the essential difference. So I think, and Sree's being too kind to himself, but I think what this book also does is it contextualizes India's economic compulsions with India's political compulsions, almost at times forced, where the hand is forced by powers that are not friendly to India or that are disruptive. In this case, I will say it, Pakistan.
I don't know if you guys knew this. I'm sure you did. But for our audience, the ink provider for our currency was also the ink provider for Pakistan's currency. So that was one of those interesting little tidbits you can take away. But
you know who owns that company? 80% of the world's printing ink is owned by a company which is provided by a company which used to be owned by Nirmal Sethia, who now is a Dubai resident from London. And Nirmal is an avowed nationalist. And Nirmal used to constantly tell me during the UPA era, he said that Chidambaram never listens to me, but there are issues with the way our currency is being printed at the various mints. And he's saying there are people who are forging the ink because they're providing ink based on tender rather than the best security ink. So there is another tale.
Amazing. So, that brings us to the second part of this book, which is sort of the fungibility of, crime, wherein, any opportunity to sort of fiddle around with currency invariably translates into criminality of possibly every single kind, leading, of course, up to terrorism, but drugs, everything in between, you have it. Because one criminal is not going to say to another criminal, say no to another prospective criminal enterprise if he's going to make a heck of a lot of money off of it. So why don't you explain to us, Sree, what are the different aspects of that fungibility of crime that you go into?
See, one of the things I had noticed before I wrote the book, of course, was the fact that in the state of Kerala, the Hindus comprise about 50% of the population, but own only 17% of the industry and 17% of the real estate property. I mean, all else being the same. I mean, India was poor for everybody. It was poor for Christians, the Muslims, and the Hindus, the Parsis, the Sikhs, everybody. So how is it that one group enjoyed a phenomenal growth, whereas the others didn't? And that's explained, that's where the thing starts feeling that, okay, so it looks like somebody's loyalty was bought, and it was bought using gobs of fake currency and gobs of enterprises, which all exist only on paper. Remember, Modi actually came in and shut down like lakhs of shell companies, lakhs of them.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So why did all that happen? Because these guys had found an easy way to basically take this loosely lying around currency, legitimize it, make it white, and God knows what are all the things they were doing. So I had to illustrate what are all the ways you can weaponize this fake currency. That's how I have all these small threads going here and there. And to make it easy for people to understand, I publish, the characters in the beginning so they can go back and read to find out who it is. And there's also a small game involved there where they try to match up the character with the real politician. That adds some gossip there. Go ahead.
Of course, for libel reasons, she will never actually tell you who the real person is. But as Suhel indicated, it is fiction that is actually quite true. Now, talking about the fungibility of crime and cartels and bosses, we come to the second part of the book, or rather, book number 2, which is
Red book.
about how one cartel protects its own interests. Like if you watch the series Narcos, you see how the Kali cartel protects against the Medellin cartel and things like that. And this has to do with cricketing as a cartel in a sense, and how you bring in glam and glitz and essentially what book 1 does with money laundering, this one does with a monopoly. So why don't you explain a bit more about that, Sree?
Sure. See, we all know that 20 years ago, match fixing reared its ugly head when one of the captains admitted, and it was not an Indian captain, it was South African captain, Hanse Cronje, Hanse Cronje, right? So then they said that, oh, we have cleansed everything, we are clean, no more match fixing. Was it true? So this is where this thing starts going back, and things were sort of okay for some years. Then suddenly the T20 format suddenly took off in England. And before the BCCI could make up its mind, an entrepreneur came along and I said, I'm going to try, and because that person lost out on the broadcasting contract for cricket. And he thought the means that were used to decide the winner were not fair. Right? So that's where this whole story starts, that somebody comes up with a rival league, a rival format, and then suddenly these guys wake up to the possibilities of money that can be made. And in between these things, there is a World championship for T20, and India ends up winning that. And suddenly every mother in the house, usually cricket was a male preserve, boys and uncles and, grandfather, everybody sat in front of the TV and watched it. Women folk in the house typically did not look at it, but IPL changed all that. Why? Because they were actresses. So I had to explain why actresses had to be roped in. What is the rationale behind all this stuff? Because to me, IPL is the pinnacle of match fixing. If you can agree with me or you cannot agree with me, I have no problem with that, because these days there are so many aspects of cricket that can be fixed and bet on that, it's very difficult for either side to prove that there is match fixing happening or no, there is no match fixing happening.
No, but it was proven 2 teams, one certainly was even banned.
Yes. That was 2013. That is right.
So Rajasthan Royals was banned. Raj Kundra was indicted.
Yes.
He was named and whatever. So you're absolutely right. And, one thing from a marketing point of view, IPL was to replace all forms of family entertainment as far as possible.
Yes.
And that's why they roped in Bollywood. They roped in industry in order to, bankroll those teams, because the teams were being paid way beyond their earning capacity in the initial years. But again, with due respect, you'll have missed the woods for the trees, and I'll tell you why. IPL, the match fixing is not happening at the owner level now. It is certainly maybe happening at the bookie level, and the bookies we have not been able to eradicate. The solution to that is to actually legalize gambling, like the Ladbrokes of the world in the UK, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
The real issue is something else. A team that I must have bought, or I could have bought for 150 crores, 200 crores, is today valued at 3,000 crores. If you look at the revised bidding for the 2 extra teams or the 2 new teams, the bids are in the region of about 3,000 to 4,000 crores. Why do people want to pay that kind of money? 3 things. Number 1, vanity, because then they rub shoulders. Number 2, constant gaze of PR, because during the IPL, the owners, in addition to the players, are the only people who are allowed into the pit. Third is that you have a lot of heft, because cricket is the unifying religion of India. So if you marry valuation with vanity, which gives you heft, it's a winning combination. And what he did was, Lalit Modi, he roped all this in. But the idea originally was Subhash Chandra's.
Yes.
But Subhash Chandra could not see eye to eye with BCCI. BCCI's head was Sharad Pawar, who was very fond of Lalit Modi. And Lalit Modi, for all his sins, is an eccentric genius. So Lalit Modi was able to bring everything, model it on the basketball Baseball
Baseball.
Commission
Yeah.
of the United States, where his role model was Peter Uberroth, who did the Los Angeles Olympics. And that's how the
1984.
whole thing took off.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
politicians got involved because the politicians were in any case controlling the cricket boards, both at the state level and at the BCCI level. So it was the perfect storm. It was the perfect
Mm.
marriage.
So
Yes.
one question each now to Suhel and one to Sree. So like you explained it, Suhel, this is like, how a BMW is actually worth only between 9 to 12 lakhs. But for that blue and white badge, you're paying an additional 60, 70 lakhs. That's the kind of fake valuation happening with these teams right now. But that's a lot like the Japanese property bubble of the 80s. So first question to you, when does that bubble burst? And under what circumstances does that bubble burst?
Brilliant question. So any valuation is only relevant if a transaction takes place. A transaction takes place from one owner to the potentially new owner. What these guys have done very cleverly is that none of the owners wants to sell. Why should they? Let me give you examples one by one. Rajasthan Royals, owned by Manoj Badale, Suresh Chelaram. Suresh Chelaram is Lalit Modi's brother-in-law. Then Raj Kundra was a minor shareholder, but he had to be evicted because of all these match fixing allegations, blah, blah. Royal Challengers, which Vijay Mallya started, was the perfect thing for a trademark extension because Royal Challenge as a liquor brand could not advertise. But on IPL, when you wore the T-shirt, when you did all of that, so that's Royal Challengers. Chennai Super Kings. Chennai Super Kings was brilliant because Srinivasan was already ejected out of the board and he wanted his revenge. And he got a team at less price than what most people would have done. I mean, the fact that he got the team itself was remarkable. And he did a great job with it. Kolkata Knight Riders was the Bollywood component. Now, look at everything. Mumbai, because of Mukesh and Neeta's love for sport. So now if you analyze everything, this is what I was saying. It's a heady concoction. Chennai has an industrialist. Bangalore had an industrialist. Today, Diageo is supporting the team. Kolkata had an actor. Punjab had Ness Wadia industrialist, Mohit Burman industrialist, Preeti Zinta minority stakeholder, actress. Rajasthan Royals, Raj Kundra at that time, Shilpa Shetty's husband. Manoj Badale, the UK boy, Prince Charles's. At that time, he was the president of Prince Charles's Prince's Trust. I mean, do you need to look any further? It's a bloody win-win. And at that time, Delhi Daredevils was GMR, which was in the infrastructure business. Now, Parth Jindal and his father Sachin of JSW own 50% of the team along with GMR.
Right.
Now, you tell me, who would ever do this analysis for you for fear of libel? No one. But these are the realities that happened. And no one is grudging it because it was, as I said, the perfect storm.
Absolutely. So the follow-on question to you, Sree, from that analysis is, because of these notional valuations, those notional valuations can always be used as collateral for real money and things like that from banks,
Correct.
which in turn, feeds into a lot of the Bollywood, Bombay police underworld nexus. So how much of this are you actually seeing getting laundered, going through and essentially fueling a kind of vicious cycle?
I wouldn't say that the money is coming back to India, especially when it's played in Dubai, right? It's all happening from one tax haven to another tax haven. Somebody pays something, somebody gets something. I believe the big money, okay, the India level where, you have bookies handling, taking bets, those things, like Suhel said, just make betting legal, collect 5% tax from the people. That way the government gets some money, all right? And that money can be used to keep track of making sure that, the betting infrastructure, because you got to provide, hotspots and stuff like that so that people can bet online to make sure that then the advantage that it'll make India even more connected. Make it legal in India. That's what I would say. But the big money where things could be settled, that I believe is happening outside of India. That is why Dubai is so convenient. Also, Dubai is sort of a controlled, atmosphere, especially in these days of pandemic. I completely agree with that. Although I was a little disappointed that if you have closed, empty stadiums, India could have hosted the complete IPL, but they didn't do it. That's fine. Be that as it may. But the impact of this whole thing is what I'm trying to bring out, saying that, the politicians are a winner. Cricketers are certainly not. And the Bollywood is sort of like kind of caught in between. They can't say yes, they can't say no. I've described some real, situations. I don't have any idea. I've never met a Bollywood actor or an actress in my life. I've never talked to any cricketer who has played at a test level in my life. It's all basically, my imagination of how things were playing out. So my request to both of you is, each of you can give me two reasons for reading the white book and the red book. And after I answer this question, I hope I've answered your question, Abhijit.
Sure. Suhel, you go first. One reason each to read white and red.
So, as I said, my reasons are common to both. Number one, they are brilliant chroniclers of India's contextual realities, context to economics, context to politics, and context to sports. And what is more remarkable is that both the books, the lowest common denominator is where there is almost a confluence. It's like a sangam where people are coming together, whether it's politics, Bollywood, and they're shifting sands. Sometimes the politicians ka palla bhari hota hai, sometimes someone else. So what I love about both the books is that they're great chroniclers of India's trials and tribulations across verticals, be it politics, sport, Bollywood, everything, and industry.
Yeah, and for me, the two biggest reasons are, one, being a financial ignoramus. It teaches me a lot in a very easy way about the way financial markets kind of work into criminality, Bollywood, glitz, glam, and all of that, number one. And number two, for the historical reasons, because, reading about financial history is so boring. But then when it's chronicled to you as fiction, it makes it a lot more interesting. And then you can kind of connect it back so easily to other stuff. But Sree, I think we've had a very decent discussion out here. Thank you, Suhel, for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Sree. I hope Suhel didn't maul you too much and you're not feeling terribly victimized and traumatized.
No, not at all. In fact, I praised him also.
Yeah. Of course you did. Of course you did. I'm just goading him a bit. So thank you, audience. Do tune back into PGurus every now and then for some fantastic discussions. And please hit like, share, subscribe. Vail, Vetri Vail. Thanks for coming on PGurus.
Thank you very much, Suhel. Thank you so much, Abhijit. And both the books are available on Amazon. You can go to amazon.in or amazon.com if you're not in India to get the books. And thanks once again for your support. And it's a pleasure expressing and sharing my thoughts on why I wrote these two books. A third book is in the works. It's going to come out very shortly. I'll share all the details as soon as I have them ready. Thank you once again. Namaskar.
Namaskar.
Namaskar.